Hey everyone, Curt Swindoll here with Debbie, and we're talking with you about Grafted Life this month in June. Excited to talk about the different aspects of the ministry as a part of our 10th anniversary, looking back a little retrospectively on what's happened over the last 10 years and sharing with you a bit about our heart's dream for the future and where we see the ministry going. We're going to start out by talking about the Spiritual Directors Association that's been a part of Grafted Life from the beginning, ESDA, the Evangelical Spiritual Directors Association. But it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to talk about that if you don't understand what spiritual direction is. So, Deb, let's start out by talking about what is spiritual direction.
Yeah, back in the day, when we started, nobody knew what spiritual direction was.
That's really true.
We did a lot of explaining.
And they didn't know what it was, and yeah.
Anyway, spiritual direction is a one another ministry where you meet about once a month with a trained listener that helps you discern where God is working in your life. So you can really talk about anything. You can talk about your relationships. You can talk specifically about your spiritual questions. But your spiritual director will always kind of bring that back around to, well, where do you see God? How are you experiencing God? What are you noticing about God and your reaction in your relationship with Him?
And you would say this is critical to anyone pursuing a spiritually formed life, true?
Yes, because to me, spiritual formation is all about learning how to be with God more and more in everything you do. So clearly growing in your capacity to notice where God is, where He's working and how you're responding and how you're with Him and aware of Him is a critical function, I think, to being formed in Christ-likeness.
So when we were creating Grafted Life, and our interest was in resourcing churches in the area of spiritual formation, it only made sense for us to think about how can we best support spiritual directors and their work in the church. So Monica Roma Green, our great colleague for years, brought the idea to us. And I remember that day, I remember instantly having a sense this resonated with me a lot and was something that we should do. And so we started it with, 16 members or something?
Yes, we called some friends and asked them if they would join. So we could get our numbers up a little bit, because otherwise there was two of us.
Nice. An association of two people. Today, 600 members in the association, 500 of them are full members, another 100 are in the course of their studies. And it's amazing to see what's happened with training programs for spiritual directors over the last 10 years, isn't it?
It really is. We could probably have named the ones we knew about on one hand. And just recently, Carol Ann was saying that, she was in contact with over 35 training programs.
My goodness.
And our chance to just learn about training programs, to be in contact with them, in some instances actually to influence what they were doing. We've had several occasions where new training programs were starting and they called us to talk about what they were doing and to just make sure that what they were doing was going to meet the requirements of ESDA so that the students that came out of their programs could become members.
Well, it's one of the great areas of impact in this part of Grafted Life we've been able to have is to help encourage a higher standard of training and development for spiritual directors. If our discussion here about spiritual direction has interested you at all, our friends, we would encourage you to go to graftedlife.org and you will see where you can search for a spiritual director in your area. You can search geographically, you can search by gender, you can search for people who do direction online, any number of different filters like that, and we encourage you to do that. So we've talked a little bit about the impact that the association has had over the last 10 years and the influence it's had in helping warm churches up to the idea of doing direction and the like. As you think about the future, Deb, what comes to your mind as kind of a dream for the Evangelical Spiritual Directors Association and our work and direction in general?
Well, I think driving that connection between churches and spiritual directors even deeper, like making that a real integration. I have a dream that, every pastor would have their own spiritual director. I mean, that would just be amazing. But that pastors would also recognize and welcome the ministry of spiritual direction, even as a supplement to their work, and that they would welcome really the what's the word I'm looking for? The influence or the experience of spiritual directors in their churches to just even help them think about what they're doing in formation.
Yeah. That's a great dream, to see the integration of formation and spiritual direction much more tightly, and to see pastors embracing it and churches embracing it, and spiritual directors encouraging churches to look into it and understand it more. And we're anticipating perhaps 50% growth in this association over just the next 3 years. I think as I look at this ministry, what I'm most interested in and excited about is the idea of our further resourcing the church, which has been part of the dream of Grafted Life all along. And that's one of the areas we'll talk about next week as we get into the subject of our curricula and the ways in which it's helped to influence churches and pastors and congregations in their formation pursuit. So we'll be excited to share all of that with you. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us today, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, bye.